"Get your hands off me, you incompetent fool." The words sliced through the air like a blade, sharp and venomous, as Captain Amara Johnson stood frozen in the middle of the bustling airport terminal. Her uniform, once a symbol of pride and accomplishment, now felt like a suffocating weight. The terminal was a cacophony of noise, announcements blaring over the speakers, the clatter of luggage wheels, the murmurs of curious onlookers. But all she could hear was the blood roaring in her ears. "Ma'am, you're not on the crew list," the guard sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "Check the system again," she said through gritted teeth, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. The guard rolled his eyes, his grip on her arm unrelenting. "Listen, lady, I don't care who you think you are. You're not getting past me." The crowd around them had started to gather, their whispers growing louder. And then, like a final blow to her already shattered pride, her own colleague, First Officer Mark Thompson, walked by. Amara's vision blurred as tears welled up in her eyes. "Fine," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'll leave." The guard released her arm with a satisfied smirk, as if he had won some great battle. But as she pushed through the glass doors and stepped into the cold night air, something inside her shifted. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and endless tears. "Save it, Mark," Amara interrupted, her voice cold and hollow. Amara hung up the phone and sank to the floor, her body racked with sobs. Amara sat at her desk, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. But now as she stared at the screen, doubt crept in. With a deep breath, she clicked post. The response was immediate. Within hours, her story had gone viral. And as she stood on stage at a sold-out event, looking out at the sea of faces before her, she realized something. An anonymous email landed in her inbox, marked with a simple subject line, "The truth." Amara's hands trembled as she listened to the recording. With the help of a trusted journalist, Amara released the documents to the public. In the midst of the chaos, she received a message from Mark. The truth was she had changed. She began speaking at conferences and universities, sharing her story and advocating for change. She started a mentorship program for aspiring pilots from underrepresented communities. Amara stood on the tarmac of a small regional airport, watching as a young woman climbed into the cockpit of a plane. The young woman turned and waved at her, a bright smile on her face. Amara stood on the balcony of her new apartment, the cool evening breeze brushing against her skin. The city skyline stretched out before her, a tapestry of twinkling lights and endless possibilities. She took a deep breath, savoring the quiet moment. It had been a long, grueling journey, but she had finally found a sense of peace, a peace she had once thought was impossible. The scars of her past were still there, etched into her heart and mind like invisible tattoos. She could still feel the sting of betrayal, the weight of humiliation, and the ache of abandonment. But those wounds no longer controlled her. They had become part of her story, a testament to her resilience and strength. Her new life was a far cry from the chaos she had left behind. She had started her own aviation consulting firm, working with companies to create more inclusive and equitable workplaces. It was challenging work, but it was also deeply fulfilling. Every time she walked into a boardroom or stood in front of a group of executives, she felt a surge of pride. She was no longer just a pilot, she was a change maker. Her days were filled with meetings, workshops, and speaking engagements. She traveled the world, sharing her story and inspiring others to stand up against injustice. But amidst the busyness, she made time for herself. She reconnected with her family, rebuilding relationships that had been strained by her years of dedication to her career. She spent weekends with her nieces and nephews, teaching them about the wonders of flight and the importance of chasing their dreams. And then there was Mark. His apology had been unexpected, and at first, Amara hadn't known how to respond. The wounds he had helped inflict were still fresh, and forgiveness didn't come easily. But over time she began to see him in a different light. He wasn't the villain she had painted him to be. He was just a flawed human being who had made a terrible mistake. They met for coffee one afternoon, the first time they had seen each other since the scandal. The air between them was heavy with unspoken words, but Amara broke the silence. "I'm not going to lie," she said, her voice steady. "What you did hurt me. It hurt more than I can put into words." Mark nodded, his eyes downcast. "I know, and I'll never be able to make it right. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. Truly sorry." Amara studied him for a moment, searching for any hint of insincerity. But all she saw was regret. "Thank you," she said finally. "That means a lot." They didn't become friends again. Some wounds were too deep to fully heal, but they found a way to coexist without resentment. It was a small step, but it was progress. As the months passed, Amara began to feel a sense of closure. The airline that had tried to destroy her was now a shadow of its former self, its reputation in tatters. The executives who had orchestrated her downfall were gone, replaced by a new leadership team committed to change. And Amara's story had become a rallying cry for diversity and inclusion in the aviation industry. But the most rewarding part of her journey was the impact she was having on others. She received letters and messages from people all over the world, young pilots, aspiring engineers, and even seasoned professionals, thanking her for her courage and inspiration. One message in particular stood out. It was from a young black woman named Tasha, who had just been accepted into a prestigious flight school. "Your story gave me the courage to chase my dream," Tasha wrote. "I know the road won't be easy, but if you can do it, so can I." Amara read the message over and over, tears streaming down her face. This was why she had fought so hard. This was why she had refused to give up. As she stood on her balcony that evening, looking out at the city she now called home, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. The pain had been excruciating, but it had also been a catalyst for growth. It had forced her to confront her fears, to dig deep and find the strength to keep going. And in doing so, she had discovered a version of herself she never knew existed. A version that was stronger, wiser, and more resilient than she had ever imagined. The journey wasn't over. There would still be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and uncertainty. But Amara knew she could face them. She had been through the fire and come out the other side. And as she turned to go inside, a smile playing on her lips, Amara stood on the tarmac of a small regional airport, the sun casting a golden glow over the runway. The air was filled with the hum of engines and the distant chatter of ground crew. But her attention was focused on the young woman climbing into the cockpit of a plane just a few yards away. Tasha, the aspiring pilot who had written to her months ago, was now living her dream. Amara had taken her under her wing, mentoring her through the challenges of flight school and helping her navigate the often unforgiving aviation industry. And now, here she was about to take her first solo flight as a certified pilot. As Tasha settled into the cockpit, she turned and waved at Amara, a bright smile on her face. Amara waved back, her heart swelling with pride. This was what it was all about, lifting others up, helping them find their wings. The plane taxied down the runway, its engines roaring to life. Amara watched intently as it lifted into the sky, climbing higher and higher until it was just a speck against the vast blue canvas. She felt a lump in her throat, a mix of emotions she couldn't quite put into words. This was her legacy. Not the scandal, not the betrayal, not the pain. The lives she had touched, the dreams she had helped ignite. As the plane disappeared into the horizon, Amara turned and walked back toward the terminal. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out to see a notification from her consulting firm. Another company had reached out, asking for her help in creating a more inclusive workplace. She smiled, a sense of purpose filling her chest. The journey wasn't over. There was still so much work to be done, so many battles to fight. But Amara was ready. She had turned her pain into purpose, her betrayal into a beacon of hope. Years later, Amara's name had become synonymous with change. Her consulting firm had grown into a global organization, working with companies across industries to dismantle systemic barriers and create opportunities for underrepresented communities. She had written a best-selling memoir, traveled the world as a keynote speaker, and even been honored with numerous awards for her advocacy work. But amidst the accolades and recognition, Amara never lost sight of what truly mattered. She continued to mentor young pilots, sharing her story and offering guidance to those who needed it most. She visited schools and community centers, inspiring the next generation to dream big and never give up. And she used her platform to amplify the voices of others, ensuring that no one had to fight their battles alone. One evening, as she sat in her office reviewing proposals for a new mentorship program, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Tasha, now a seasoned pilot with a major airline. "Thank you for believing in me," the message read. "You changed my life." Amara smiled, her eyes filling with tears. This was why she had fought so hard. This was why she had refused to give up. She leaned back in her chair, gazing out the window at the city skyline. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. It was a new day, a new beginning. And as she sat there, surrounded by the fruits of her labor, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. The pain had been excruciating, but it had also been a gift. It had forced her to confront her fears, to dig deep and find the strength to keep going. And in doing so, she had discovered a version of herself she never knew existed. A version that was stronger, wiser, and more resilient than she had ever imagined. The journey wasn't over. There would still be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and uncertainty. But Amara knew she could face them. She had been through the fire and come out the other side.